My name is Reed Benoit. I'm a senior here at Lewis and Clark College. I'm the chair of the Student Academic Affairs Board, or SAAB. SAAB is the liaison between the academic side of campus and the Associated Students of Lewis and Clark, or the student government. I've been at SAAB for the past 2 years, first as vice chair and now as chair. I got involved with SAAB because I wanted to do something concrete here on campus. I wanted to be able to point to that and say, I helped somebody. And I've been able to do that through SAAB. SAAB has a grant program where we fund student-initiated projects that go above and beyond. We have a tutoring program as well, where each student here on campus is guaranteed 2 hours of free tutoring every week. And being able to develop those programs, make sure they run smoothly, seeing the students who are able to travel around the world or, I don't know, pass a course because of the things that SAAB does, it feels good.
I'm Paul Jorgensen. I was the class of 1985, and I was probably on the ground floor of SAAB as a freshman. To this day, I still can't quite remember exactly how I got involved, other than I was in the Student Senate, which was the predecessor to SAAB, and somehow got swept up in the sense of revolution that a lot of seniors had, which was that the Senate simply didn't work, that it was ill-conceived, that the representation based on where one lived really wasn't a great idea, and they really wanted to have something that was more representative of the students and actually served the students a lot more.
So all I did was sit down with them and ask a question, because they were very frustrated with themselves. They weren't frustrated with me, they were frustrated with their own system that they had created, their government. It is not working. And I said, well, why are you here? Why did you come here? That was my basic question. I said, did you come here so that you could live in Copeland Hall or Platt Howard? Because that's how you're representing yourselves on Student Senate. Did you come here so that you could live in a particular building? Well, no, they didn't. I said, why are you here? Well, we're here for the academic life of the college. And I said, well, you have a student government that is out of alignment with the academic life of the college. How does the academic life of the college align itself? How are they organized? The answer was by departments. So it didn't take long for it to dawn on them that that's maybe how they should organize at least some part of the student government.
I often kid Michael Ford that the beginnings of the new student government started on the back of a napkin. Together we sat in the trail room and began to sketch out what a new government structure might look like. So we began to conceive of the idea of a special Student Academic Affairs Board which would entertain proposals from students for research that would really help to encourage their academic pursuits while they were undergraduate students at the college.
In order to bring SAAB to reality, one of the first things that had to happen is the Student Senate had to agree essentially to vote itself out of existence, which created this huge uproar about the ideals of democracy, or what I like to think of as the illusion of democracy at the student government level, because there are those who are certainly wed to the idea that we have in government, which is we're represented based on where we live. So that meant bylaws changes, that meant Bob Jones in particular, who was the student body president, going to Jim Gardner and working alongside faculty and staff who championed the idea to get the administration to be willing to support it, because this was a redirection of student fees. So it wasn't just the students waking up one day and deciding, you know, we don't need a student senate anymore. We were creating something truly unique that would have an impact all across the campus and eventually outside the campus. So the mechanics of gaining support were the first thing, which frankly was one of the big lessons learned. Most of us didn't really have experience trying to speak truth to power or even ideas to power at this level, and that was something that, Michael in particular, Michael Ford, really helped us navigate as a student body. And then we also had to convince our fellow students that this was the right thing to do, because they got to vote whether or not the body that represented them would continue to do so in the way it had been, or if we're going to go this new direction. So that meant, more than a few hours of conversations, getting people to buy into the process, and then actually starting to do the work of putting the mechanics in place and conducting an election that was going to allow us to move forward.
If we could create a device that would allow people to explore their academic and intellectual curiosities, which was at the core of the values of what the college should be about, and be able to give that life and breadth and allow people to really pursue their interests outside of the structure of what was already in place and already recognized nationally, I thought that was a pretty great deal. It was a pretty great deal for kind of everybody. So at the time I was a senator in the student government, and I remember getting deeply in behind and pushing hard to kind of persuade the administration and everybody around us that this was a great idea.
The focus of our board really was kind of making the mission or the vision around student-initiated research and student-initiated involvement in academic affairs of the college. That was really our focus. We, as a board, I remember the first board meeting we had, we talked about the fact that we wanted to make sure that that notion of student-initiated was carried through whatever we did. And we also spent some time talking about how we could get more involved in the academic life of the college. I remember walking from a class one day, and one of the SAAB board members came up to me and said, I just was talking to a friend of mine, and she's really struggling in biology, and why couldn't we build a program where we could create a student-initiated, student-funded, at least in part, tutoring program? And it just kind of hit me like a bolt of lightning. We spend time on policy issues, we issue grants for research, but we also could help students in their classes. So the board got together and we worked with the college and talked about how we could put a student tutoring program together. And it just sort of took off from there. And now I think it's a pretty pervasive, pretty important part of folks and how they get some help in some of their classes.
There was, at that time, a growing sense that we wanted to have something that would give out student grants and that would give money to students. And this was a pretty revolutionary idea. I know today it's been going for a long time, but it was pretty revolutionary at that time. So to go from something that was sort of a staid, off-the-shelf kind of Senate to SAAB was a huge thing. And it was a huge thing for two reasons. One was we had really no precedence. We had no model to build it off of. So the model had to be built wholesale. And that was a lot of fun. The second was we had to sell this to the student body. And that's where I came in. And they had asked me to essentially create a series of advertisements. And the student body had to vote on it, and they got it. They said yes, they really wanted to do it. So it was really very rewarding. And there was this kind of two waves of reward. There was the sense that we'd won, if you will. But then there was this second wave, which was, okay, now what? Now we got to implement this thing. And thankfully, the group that had been working on it really did think about a lot of different problems that might come up and a lot of different things about implementation. And it was easy to do. It was not automatic, but it was something that we could sort of nurse into its first years of life. And we got good people who were involved in it initially, who really believed in it. And for a while, people didn't really know how to use it. They didn't know how to make it valuable. And I think after a while, they finally got it. And of course, it still exists today. And it's become I think the kind of the gold standard. And a lot of other schools have tried to copy the same kind of program. And SAAB was really the cornerstone of it. We did have other elements to the government as well, but it really was the cornerstone of the whole thing.
I was tasked with trying to sell this thing politically, and that involved also working with the president of the college at the time, Jim Gardner. And I guess the most memorable thing for me was after we'd managed to get the thing voted in by a fairly high percentage. I don't remember the number, but it was well past 60% of the students voted in favor of this idea. I happened to run into President Gardner over in Pamplin Sports Hall, and he was, I think, a little upset. And he said, I heard from the board that there's a sizable increase in the student fees of roughly $50,000 to fund this new program, and I was surprised by this. I didn't know about it, and I was kind of caught off guard, and it's caused a problem for me. And so, unbeknownst to everyone except for the sitting group of student leaders at the time, we had passed this new program, but the funding was put on hold until such time as we could defend it before the Board of Trustees. So in that process, the key player was Michael Higgins. He put together a long memo that detailed the entire process of setting up the Student Academic Affairs Board and how the students were behind it and so on, and all the processes that led to this new organization, this new part of the government. And he had to bring that then to the board. And by the time we actually spoke to the board, it was already early June, if memory serves. And if he had not prevailed there, then I guess either this process would have been put on hold for a year or may have dissipated altogether. But I can still remember vividly sitting in the room while Mike presented this. He was probably 20 years old, already balding a little bit. Seemed like a 35-year-old lawyer in his prime, and was just very well spoken, and the board, I think, was very impressed. And I still think that his role there in that moment was really one of the things that carried the day for us.
I got involved with SAAB during my sophomore year. There was a vacancy with the vice president position, and I decided it'd be a wonderful opportunity to kind of get involved with the academic aspect of how the school is run and understand more about how courses are chosen and how students kind of excel in their majors and how we can support them with those goals. Luckily, during that time period, we had a wonderful opportunity to celebrate SAAB's 25th anniversary. And the backstory behind that is basically that our on-site historian, Michael Ford, knew that we were coming upon the 25th anniversary and that SAAB was so unique and had won so many awards and had reached out to students in so many different capacities that it was worthwhile to celebrate this big occasion. So my vice chair, Amanda Lamb, and I during that year worked on, with a substantial guidance and help from Michael, planning our 25th anniversary reunion, which had over 200 people in attendance. We had alums from as far back as the beginning in the early, I guess it was the mid-'80s, that SAAB started, and we had them present. We had speakers talking about the different types of grants that they gave. We had students present who had received art grants and were auctioning off their art to support the other big aspect of our goal that year, which was to create an endowment for SAAB. And our goal in doing that was to make sure that if SAAB had a special project or ran out of funding for something, but there was a worthwhile student endeavor, that the board would have the flexibility to invest the money where they saw fit. Overall, I think that was just a phenomenal way to go out of the institution. That happened my senior year, and in the midst of writing a IA thesis on international dispute resolutions and planning a big party, I think it was the perfect balance.
I was the vice president for SAAB in 2000 through 2002, and it was an amazing experience. So we started, that period was when we really started looking at the mechanics of what we were doing. So SAAB had been giving out tons and tons of money to amazing programs for several years. I think it had given out almost $1 million by the time I was vice president. And so I had a little bit of a background in private foundation grant making, and so I really looked into formalizing some of the grant structures, making the applications a little bit more reflective of what students might see if they were to go on to apply for grants elsewhere. Say they were applying to a private foundation or they were applying to something for an academic research grant. But a lot of people talk about SAAB and the great things that it did for grant making, but one of the really interesting things that was part of why it was created was to facilitate students connecting with the academic life of the college. So I believe the official title when I was there was Vice President for Student Academic Affairs. And so part of my job was to connect with people like the dean. At the time, there were also divisional deans to serve on I'm not going to get this right, the committee that approved new courses. And so that was something that kind of took a backseat a little bit sometimes, but it was something that was really important. And so when the vice chair and I were seeking out people to serve on SAAB, we were really trying to seek out people that were going to be able to connect us with departments and be able to talk, be involved in their departments. Several of the departments at the time were looking into doing capstone projects. So our representatives to the various departments were involved in that. I was a representative again on the committee that approved courses. I met really regularly with the Dean of the Arts and Sciences to talk about kind of what the directions of the academic affairs of the college were.
I would say so many things that I learned in my time as a SAAB VP and in my experiences at Lewis and Clark as a campus leader definitely carried over into my life as a county commissioner. You learn on a campus about stakeholders and stakeholder interests and what each group is looking for, and you learn how to communicate among those various groups, and you learn, and for me, it was a particularly important lesson that, the authority, the staff and the faculty wanted you to engage them more like peers. And I think when you have that ability to engage people who might otherwise not see you as their peer, I think it makes it quite possible to run for office at an early age, to collaborate among a variety of groups when you're in office and produce new policies and new initiatives. And I think that certainly there's a sense of integrity that comes with SAAB in particular, I would say, because it's so academic oriented, that really transferred to kind of a solid ethical political self too. So I think that there was a lot that I learned during my time here, not the least of which was how to run a meeting.
Being SAAB chair allowed me to make so many connections with such interesting people that you often don't get to meet. So if you're an art major, you hang out with certain groups of people, but do you ever really go over and talk to biology majors? I didn't until I started doing SAAB, and then I thought to myself, wow, your research projects are fascinating, you're a really cool person, and instead of being in academic silos, I think it brought people together and created a unique community that really celebrates the foundation of Lewis and Clark, which is its academic pursuits and the faculty that support those students. So.
My experience with SAAB actually started sophomore year, to be honest with you. It's a long time ago to think about it right now. So since I came to Lewis and Clark, I always thought about actually conducting research, and I always wanted to do that. I just didn't know how. I started talking with different professors, and I got into different research labs. And then my final, the research lab that I'm currently working in right now is with Dr. Jennifer Labonte. And I started working with her, and I just loved it. But I felt like I wanted to meet more people who are also doing the same things, students who are also doing the research. Like, I know I'm not the only one who's doing it, but like, why other people are doing it too? So that's why my research team decided to apply to the SAAB grant during my sophomore year, I believe spring semester, to go to Seattle for a conference. we did the research here on campus. We didn't need funding for that. I mean, the professor got funding for that, but we didn't need SAAB for that. But we needed the money to go to the conference. And for a lot of people, going to conferences it's a lot of fun, because basically you present for one day, but you get paid to go there for 4 or 5 days. And a lot of people think about it as an opportunity to have a lot of fun. But for me, I basically wanted to meet as much people as possible who are doing the same thing what I'm doing right now, because I wanted to know what I'm doing right now, and also people who are professionals in that field. I just wanted, because basically I wanted to see my future, and because those people are my future, because that's what I'm going to be studying. So after I went to that conference, I learned so much. I was introduced to a lot of new ideas that I never thought I would. I was actually introduced to different fields in psychology that I didn't know they existed. And then I kept that in mind. And then I thought okay, actually I wanted to do research before, and after I got that funding, after I'm doing that research, I actually want to do something more. I want to go to more conferences. And SAAB gives you that opportunity. Lucky for us, ASLC students, that we have that SAAB grant that we could apply to.
My first SAAB grant research fund was started from the class, and I want to expand it more in the field research. So I was looking at Indonesian, Chinese and Dutch colonial art in Indonesia in a specific time period, which is in the 18th and 19th century. So it brought me to a place in Central Java where there are a lot of Chinese architecture. They are still intact, not bulldozed over. And then in this small town, and I got to go there and do field research, interview people, and really come back with new information about these architectures, because nobody has ever really talked about this yet in the West. So this is really something that make me feel that through SAAB grant, I can contribute to the academic world, and even though it's not much, but I can make a difference.
I'm just so glad it's still here. I think it's still unique, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. I know it's affected many people's lives and what they've ended up doing in their professional lives later on. I've had several people, come and say SAAB was kind of the reason I'm doing this today, and that feels good. It's a pretty special thing.